Hey guys, how's it going? It's Sunday guy back at you with another episode of It Has a Certain Sound. Episode 7. Today we're going to be talking about a Paul Horn record. He is a jazz flautist. And this record is called Altura do Sol. It says here what? It says high sun. I think it's supposed to. I think it said it means like praise to the high sun. And this record, I like it a lot. I say that a lot, don't I? I like this record a lot. It's like a jazz, I guess jazz fusion, but it's Ron Carter playing bass, and it's Paul Horn playing the flute, and there's a guy, I think it's a guy that Ron Carter brought in, because I saw also that he played with Weather Report. I think it said from 71 to 74. Dom something, but he's the percussionist on this record, and but he's from Brazil. And then the guy that this is supposed to be, so Paul Horn apparently heard this guy's music. It was Egberto Gismonti, and he heard this guy. I guess I don't know what he heard. It doesn't say it on the back. They both talk a little bit, but yeah, he heard this guy's music, Egberto, and he was a Brazilian jazz musician, and he had Teo Macero. He had Teo Macero go and find him in Brazil, which is, I thought that was pretty interesting too. So he went over there, and that's the producer for Paul Horn, who's also the producer for Miles Davis, even during the Bitches Brew era. So I thought that was interesting too, especially because I do like I love Miles Davis. Miles Davis is one of my favorite musicians, and like just my favorite music to listen to tends to be like a lot of Miles stuff, especially like the moodier stuff, the stuff that was like mid '60s to mid '70s. And so I thought that was really interesting, because I do like the way that this record sounds too. I don't know how much this guy, the producer Teo, has to do with the records, but it's interesting, I thought. And so he goes to find this guy, and I'm assuming that this guy also brought over two other musicians. There's one guy that plays, it says, the electric piano. I think he's probably playing the synth. And I don't know, maybe there's some electric piano in there. I hear a lot of the normal piano, and then I hear a lot of different sounds come through, and then there's effects on different things. But they have that guy, and he's straight. I'm pretty sure he's from Brazil with this with the Egberto guy, and then the drummer is, I think, also from Brazil, or like from Brazil with this guy. So I think those three were musicians in Brazil that came over here with Egberto, and then all of these are his songs too. I think it said all these are his compositions, and this record has a different feel to it because of that. I think you've got Ron Carter filling in like this really, really good space with the bass, and I'm pretty sure it's an electric bass, because it sounds really, really big. It kind of sounds like those live Latin records, like the Mongo Santa Maria and stuff like that, like live at Montreux. The bass always sounds really, really big, and it's like during that like 70s era with Latin music, is like the recording, the production with the recording for the live stuff, I think sounded really, really good. And in the 80s too, I think that the 80s, the live stuff sounded really good compared at least to the 60s and the 70s. And so you have these two jazz musicians with these Brazilian jazz musicians, and like American jazz musicians with Brazilian jazz musicians, and it sounds like I don't know, it just sounds like its own thing. It sounds very much Brazilian, but the combination of stuff is like, I don't know, it's a different feel, It's like, it almost feels, to be honest, the first song, it's like with the drums are kind of like break beaty drums, like almost like jungle, like it's really really good. And then also there's enough space in the music, enough pauses in the music where the drums don't become too overwhelming, but a lot of it is really really fast, and then the melodic instruments will kind of just sit in the back. There's a lot of Brazilian instruments on this record. They've got, like they've got like seeds, and they've got a cuica on the third track of the song. It's especially apparent where it's like it literally just sounds like it's like a hand percussion drum, and it's got like a stick on the inside of it, and that's wrapped up on a leather head on the top side of the drum, and then you go in from the bottom of the drum, and then I think you're supposed to use like a wet towel, but when you put like a little bit of pressure and just kind of like rub there's like a wooden pole piece in it, and it like sends a vibration to the head, and it goes like whoop whoop, and it sounds like a monkey. It's kind of crazy how they did that. And it's just this specifically Brazilian instrument, and it's on a good portion of this record. And I love it. Like, I think that this record does sound a lot like the Amazon, like it sounds like a jungle. It sounds like a wet, dense jungle, and it's very very moody. This record is very moody. This is a really interesting jazz record because it is very it's very specific. It sounds like a very specific thing, but at the same time it's not I don't think it's that hard to listen to. Like, I think it's really like it's very very musical still, even though it's like really trying to capture an essence with just sounds. And like there's some jazz that is I guess I'll use the word eccentric, but that's just because I think that that's the right word to give it in context to the way that a lot of people listen or like hear it as. But there's a lot of like out jazz and or whatever that means, like a lot of free jazz and stuff that's really just using sounds to, or like using instruments to create sounds and create like specific like feelings, and this record does that without it being difficult to understand. And I think that that's really interesting because it takes you to a really interesting place while still being like accessible. And yeah, and I just want to say this again too. I was really 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 blown away by the mixture of like the samba. I don't know. I guess the American jazz sensibility, but you know what? It's the chords that Egberto plays on the piano are definitely more Latin sounding chords, and it sounds more Latin the way that he's playing. And then Ron Carter, I think he does it on purpose. I think he keeps it more like American jazzy, and I want to say with like sevenths, and like he stays more like in a range that's more familiar to American jazz. And then you have the Brazilian rhythm section going off with the samba rhythm, and then you have Egberto playing this more Latin sounding piano, a little bit more dissonant, and then that sits in the back, and he does that too with the guitar. The guitar to me also sounds very much like a piano. And I think that bossa nova does that very very well. They use, when they play guitar, a lot of the times they'll be playing almost like piano chords and shapes, and like very specific. It moves in the way that a piano would move because of the way that the chords move on a piano. But it's guitar, and he does that really really well. And like I said, it's a little bit dissonant. And then Paul Horn does a really really good job of sitting in the middle and kind of bringing everything together. And yeah, it's just a special record. The percussion in the back really really sets it apart too. I think that gives it a lot of the jungle feel too. And it's impressive too because this is like I was thinking while I was listening to this, this was just the right the right like mixture combination of musicians to get something that sounds like a specific thing out, you know? And it just happened to work out really really well, cuz sometimes this stuff gets put together and then it doesn't really come out as like something, I don't know, tangible's not the right word, but I want to, well, I guess it doesn't come out as tangible, I think, as I would like, at least some of the stuff. You know, where it's like it becomes a real thing, but it's not very easy to grasp, and it slips out of your hands, and and it's just not always there to grab at. It's almost like it has to be in very, very specific moments that you're able to grab it. And this record, it's like there's a lot of records I think are like that, where you start listening and you're like, I don't really like this, and then you visit it another day and then you're like, oh, actually this is really cool. And I guess it has to do with, well, for sure it has to do with the way your taste changes, and it's also, just the type of mood that you're in during that day. But it just doesn't always come out like as something that you can really get a hold of. This record I think does a really good job of being accessible. I feel like it is a tangible thing. It's something that blossomed into a real flower that you could just go and smell. you know and so it starts off, a lot of the record is very trance like, melodically, and then the rhythms kind of give it a pace, and they're also very trance like because it stays very in the rhythm. It doesn't really move around. They're very much staying in there. That's kind of what gives it, I think, a jungle feel, gives it like that trance like feeling. you know the first song kind of starts off feeling like, almost like a meditation, and it's just like it's kind of going through, and then the drums come in, and it's like it picks up, and it's like it comes alive. And then there's like synths on it, and they have, I think, also like echoes and stuff on the flutes and on different instruments, and it sounds really really interesting. This record is weird because there's times where you hear these electronic instruments that are more of the time that it is of, because I think it came out in 77 or 75. I think it was 70. It might have been 76. So let's say it comes out in 76. There's a lot of electronic instruments around at that time, and they do use them, but it's like it doesn't lose it's more like, I guess, like traditional sound, where it sounds like instruments that are putting this together. But it's like they just come in very subtly, and they kind of work their way in, and it gives it a different feel. It's really really interesting, and that also, to me, it makes this record feel more like a modern record, I think, because of the fact that there's a lot that's being used, a lot of ideas that are being used in this music, and it almost feels like it comes from a time when a lot of this stuff was already kind of like, a lot of this stuff musically was already kind of put on the table, but it wasn't. Like the electronic feeling jazz is not, and it's not like this is an electronic album. This is just a record. It's a jazz record that's very very much jazz, but it has some electronic stuff on it, and it's used as like textures. It's not used as like in a normal instrument sense. It's very much used as like a texture to add on. It's like a layer. It's not an instrument on there. But everything else is like, there are these instruments, and these instruments are playing, but these are just textures that get thrown in, and that's why it feels more modern to me. And the fast-paced drums on it too, like I said, it reminds me a lot of jungle, and that makes it feel to me a lot more modern. Even though this came out during the jazz fusion era, like the 70s was really big for that, but it doesn't feel like a jazz fusion record. It feels like just a mix between like jazz and samba, but not bossa nova, because then you have like that more jazzy mix that gets put into it, I guess. I don't know. It doesn't feel like bossa nova. That's why I'm kind of struggling to put it into words. And I mean, like, labels, you know, it's a label, whatever. I could say it sounds like chicken feeding music, you know. What does that mean? You know, but just to try to kind of like, you know, it's a very unique record, and that's what I enjoy about that, is like really listening to it, and being like, yeah, this is something different, you know. This is something that sounds like its own thing. Altura do Sol is, I think, my favorite song on the record. It's a shorter song. I think it's about 3.5 or 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes, something like that. And that song, I think, gets the jungle feeling really, really well. That song feels more Brazilian. It feels more like a samba than the other songs, to be honest. Or at least on the first side, it feels the most samba-like. And it's just a really, really good, interesting song. It like starts you off, and there's like, it's that monkey noise that comes in, and then stuff starts adding on, building up. And then the flute, I think, does a really good job of keeping you in the forest like that, in the jungle. And it's just very, very interesting to listen to. You know, this record has a lot of layers on it that give it its feel. There's a lot of playing around with harmonies and chords and going back and forth, and almost like it's almost a little bit like they're playing together, but then it does feel a little bit like there's maybe a little bit of like pushing each other, you know, back and forth, and just trying to dig deeper, you know, into the feeling that they're trying to convey. And then there's some songs on here that they have strings on them. The last one on the first side, I think it's called Karma, has them. And that one, and Karma too, it's a nice break from the Altura song right before it, because it's very intense, and then it goes into something that's a lot softer, and the strings sound very beautiful. And I think that this whole record is really good from beginning to end. I think that it is definitely worth listening to from beginning to end. And I think, to be honest, yeah, just start the record, and then just play it if you want an idea of like normally I'll say, you know, oh, I like this song, maybe start out with this song, and then it'll kind of give you an idea of the feel of the rest of the record. But with this, I'd say just sit down and listen to it if you want to give it a chance. This record, if you're not used to listening to jazz, it might be a little bit like strange, but I think that it's interesting enough with the sounds that it has to just be enjoyable to anybody, you know. I think like you just have to sit there and listen. And something that I do want to say about this record, my buddy Robbie, who he comes to the record store a lot, and he has a show on the radio show that Kems and Ralph do here on Saturdays at the record store. Above the Clouds Radio, all right? It starts at around 3 usually, and then it goes on. Sometimes it's 2-3 hours, sometimes 4 hours, and it's streaming vinyl only club, bro. Vinyl only club. And that's streaming here on Saturdays, and I'll put a link to that in the description if anybody wants to check that out. It's 100% worth checking out. It's a lot of new music, a lot of different music that you get to listen to. I listen to it, and it's like most of the time I'm listening to stuff that I haven't really heard before. Or if it's something that I have heard before, it's probably, you know, it's usually something interesting, because Ralph and Kems, they have really good taste, man. And a lot of the dudes that come into this record store, a lot of the people in general, you know, there's dudes and dudettes that come in here and put me onto really, really good records all the time. And so, you know, even when it's something that I've heard before, it's usually something I'm like, oh man, I haven't listened to that in a while. I should definitely listen to that again. And Robbie has a show. It's called The Stone Garden. It's on Wednesdays, once a month. I'll put the Wednesday that it is in the description, so you guys can check it out too if you want. And actually, you know what? I'll link a couple of the mixes from the show in the description too, so that way if anybody wants to check them out, they could do that there. And Robbie put me on this record, and he was like, oh, yo, you got to check out this Paul Horn record. And I didn't know who Paul Horn was before this record either. And Ralph was saying that there's 2 Paul Horn records that he really, really likes. This is one of them. I don't remember what the other one was. I don't remember which one he said, or if he remembered the name of it or not. But Robbie put me on this record, and he told me, oh, I think you'll really like this. and he played it, and as soon as the beginning hit and I heard like the kind of synths and like the stuff echoing out, and then I heard the drums come in, when the drums came in, I was like, oh man, I'm gonna for sure like this record. And then I did end up liking this record. I love the whole record. So shout out to Robbie for showing me this record, and he pulled it out of the $5 bin. To be honest, I think this was like in the $3 bin here, because I think it'd been in the $5 bin for a while, and then Ralph was just like, I'll put it in the bottom bin because nobody wants to buy Paul Horn. Poor Paul. And Robbie pulled it out, handed it over to me, played it, and I was like, oh shoot. So I bought this thing for $3, and it sounds actually like really, really good. It sounds really, really good, and I'm really happy about it. So shout out to Robbie. Also, I'm gonna call Robbie out right now. Okay. So Robbie said he wants to swing by on a Sunday. There's a reason why they call me Sunday Guy. I open the store up on Sundays, and then I'm here on Sundays all day, and so he was saying, you know, like, oh, I don't have anything to do on these Sundays for a little bit, so maybe I'll swing by the store. And I told him, yo, you should get on the show, because he was like, oh yeah, I get to swing by and see behind the scenes of the show. Oh man. And I told him, yo, you should be on a show, and he was like, no, I don't want to be on a show. But he's a cool guy, and I know that because he does the same thing as me, where it's like, he'll be like, oh yeah, this record feels like this, but this record feels like this. Like, I remember there's this Townes Van Zandt record called Our Mother the Mountain, and I wasn't super into it. It wasn't my thing, and I had found this copy of an original copy, like an OG Poppy copy, and I found it for like a few bucks at a store. And I was telling him about it, and it's an expensive record, and I owned it, and I really like Townes, but I didn't get so much into the record. And then he was telling me, no, man, the title track on that record is really, really good, and it is really, really good. And I'd heard it before, but it was at a time where I wasn't like super into folk music as much and like country music as much, and I had more like specific tastes. And he told me, no, that song's really, really good. And I went back and I listened to it. And I listened to the whole record, and I ended up really, really liking it. But he was explaining it, and he's like, man, that song is like, he's talking about a witch, and it sounds really, really dark and everything. And it's just, you know, he has his brain work the same way with music to a certain extent. And so I think it'd be really interesting to have him on the show. So, yo, Robbie, you said you'd consider doing it. I'm calling you out, man. You got to swing by on a Sunday, and we can do a record. I have a record in mind. I'm not going to say it. I know that you own it, though, and I own it, and we could both listen to it and then convene here on a Sunday and talk about it. That'd be cool, man. So yeah. Shout out to Robbie, though, because he puts me on really, really good music all the time. He's got really good taste. All right. Again, y'all, this is the record. Check it out. Super, super intense cover. Feels more lighthearted than it looks, maybe, but dude, this cover is actually super, super crazy, very, very intense, and I like it a lot. This record is really, really intense, and no way. All right, so guys, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Feel free to leave a comment. You know, let me know what you think. And I definitely want people to be able to come on here and then maybe like have discussions in the comments about the different records and about how they make them feel. You know, like I want to see that stuff. I want to see what other people think and feel about the record, you know. I definitely want to know what these things make you guys feel like, because I mean that's one of the special parts of music, you know. That's one of the really interesting parts about it, is that we have these specific experiences, and the way that we interpret, you know, the world around us through our senses is determined by these unique experiences, you know. So I'm talking about the way these records make me feel. I'd love to hear how they make you guys feel. And, you know, and then we can talk about it, and because it's just interesting, you know, it's just interesting. Everybody's interesting for their own reasons and their own ways. All right, guys, I'll catch you later. Take it easy, be safe. As my boy Nico would say, one love. And as my boy Al Chestbreach would say, away.